Hi everyone, it's Meg Sharp from the Cambridge Group of Clubs, and I'm here to try and add in some information about the blog that I just posted on IT band. Now, for those of you that do have sore, tight IT bands, this is often due to mechanical challenges that have built up over years. Lots of running, cycling, even sitting with poor posture. It can be quite complicated, so I'm going to do my best to take you through some of my favorite exercises, but please, as we've been saying for the past couple of weeks, let one of the incredible trainers on my team into your home. Let us have a quick look at your squat mechanics, at your posture, at the way everything lines up, and we can really customize something specifically for you. But as I said, I wrote lots in that blog, and I do want to make sure you have a clear idea of what I was referring to with some of that mobility and stability. So as I did say, one of the challenges often with someone who has really tight IT bands is that they lack full hip extension. So full hip extension would be bringing my pelvis from this slight anterior posture all the way through, so driving my hips up and under so they sit right under my shoulders. This requires lots of hip mobility, but also really good strength through the glutes, through the abdominal, and often requires a relatively good open posture on the top. So that sometimes what we'll see is if someone sits with an anterior tilt, they've got tight hamstrings, tight calves, tight hip flexors. They lack some of that strength through the glutes and the abdominal. And this lower posture is often accompanied by some rounding of the shoulders, some tightness through the front of the neck, through the front of the shoulders, through the pecs, and through here. So it's not necessarily a simple fix, but definitely one of the things that can help is to open up those hips, open up those hip flexors, open up the adductors a little bit, which may be tight, pulling the knees in, pulling the pelvis closed, and then strengthen those glutes, those adductors, and the core muscles. So let's have a look at all of that. So first thing we want to do is that mobility piece. I've done this in a few videos before. One of my very favorite is a dynamic psoas stretch. So as with the psoas, I've got my knees in 90 degrees. I'm using my glute to tuck the pelvis under and really feel a stretch through that hip flexor. Deep breath in. And then as I exhale, I stretch a little bit, getting into that lumbar spine and stretching through that hip flexor. So nice and strong on the breath. I'm going to do two more here, and then we're going to switch sides, and we'll move right into the next mobility protocol. Now you could do this 4, 5, 10, maybe even 20 passes through, but I want to get through as many different things as I possibly can. So again, use the glutes to stack that hip right under those shoulders. Deep breath in. Exhale, reach the ribs away from the hips without moving the hips, so those hips stay nice and stable right there, nice and square. I keep them facing right towards the fence in front of me, using that glute strength to hold the hips in that stable position so that I can really stretch and lengthen through that hip flexor. Great, fantastic. From there, I'm going to go a little bit wider. I'm going to try and get a bit of mobility through my adductors, as well as encourage a bit of that hip extension. I'm going to bring the hands down, and I'm going to bring them up and extend back. So I'm going to come down, I'm going to extend up all the way through. So a little stretch through the front of the shoulders, and then up, flex through the glutes to open up through that pelvis. Gentle stretch through the adductors, a little bit of engagement through the glutes. From there, often, as I mentioned, the IT band attaches right into those glutes, so stretching, rolling through that glute can be helpful. Stretching also extremely helpful. Pigeon pose is probably one of my favorites for this area. So I've got my knee in front of me, and then I'm going to roll over, really feeling that stretch through the glute, opening up through the chest. I'm going to take a deep breath in, I'm going to relax out of it, and then I'm going to drive my hips and shoulders forward right over that knee. I've got some gentle abdominal engagement to ensure that I don't feel that in my low back. Breathing out, let's do that 2 more times. We'll switch sides, so breathe in, we open up, breathe out, right into that stretch. Drive that right hip and right shoulder so they're nice and square. Gonna go one more time. And then I'm going to relax. I'm going to switch sides. I'm going to take this knee out, extend this leg back over. Hands on either side of my knee to help me with that stability. Of course, more comfortable, sorry to put my back to you, more comfortable with the knee in this position, and then I drive my hips through on that extension of that breath. So again, deep breath in. Exhale, push the hip forward. Nice strong stretch both through the hip flexor and through the glute. I'm going to keep my head in a not great position just so that you can hear me. But I would like you to open up your face. Keep your face facing the same direction as your chest. We're going to go one more time. Open up and then drive through the glutes and abs right to that side there. Pigeon pose is not a great one for everyone. You do need a relative amount of flexibility. Another favorite stretch of mine for stretching the glutes that I do put in the post is the figure 4. I'm down on my back. I'm going to, because I'm anticipating that some of you may be very tight through the low back, let's ensure that we protect that low back. I'm going to ask you to almost tilt the pelvis up a little bit, engage through the abs, use that ab strength to lift this leg up and cross it over your opposite leg. You're now going to lift this leg and bring it up, and you should feel a nice gentle stretch through this glute right there. You're going to breathe in. As you exhale, you're going to hug that knee a little closer to you, and then deep breath in, back off it a tiny bit. Exhale, keep the shoulders nice and wide. We don't want to, again, encourage that closing of the shoulders, but keep everything nice and open. A little bit of low tension through the abdomen to help you protect that low back, and hug it in. And of course, we would then repeat that on the other side. So there's our figure 4 stretch. So once you've opened up the hips a little bit, we're now ideally in a better position to look at strengthening the glutes. All-time favorite exercise for strengthening the glutes and the core is that hip bridge. So that beautiful, simple position. Heels are close enough to my hands that I can almost touch them with my fingers, or maybe I actually can touch them with my fingers if you are able to get the knees to bend to that degree. Again, if you're feeling like you're very tight through the low back and you want to ensure you protect it a little bit, we are not jamming our back down into the mat, but you are almost elongating the low back a little bit, or thinking about tilting that pelvis a little bit. So you've got a little bit of a pelvic tuck. I like to draw my shoulders down and back a little bit. Gentle pressure with the elbows into the mat. That both helps me open up the chest, increase that stretch here, and it also helps me gain a little bit of stability. Nice deep breath in. On the exhale, drive the heels into the ground. Flex the glutes, flex the abs. Bring the hips up into a nice straight line and hold for a minute. And then come back down. If you feel that coming into your low back a little bit, try again. Neutralize the pelvis before you move. Drive the elbows gently into the mat, heels into the mat. Come up. Keep that pelvis nice and neutral. And even think about driving the knees out a little bit. The knees don't move, but it's almost as if you can externally rotate. You can rotate the femur, your thigh bone, in the hip socket to create that little bit of abduction. Because we definitely know that for people who have that challenge with the IT band, they can be quite weak in the abductors. So getting that thigh to rotate a little bit in the hip socket, we open up the pelvis a little bit more. We get a little more room for the glutes to move and flex. We get into those abductors, that glute med and glute min, and other muscles again that are going to help support that IT band. So this is a fantastic one, and we can go into one-legged hip bridges. We can go into hip bridges here, single leg versions, all of that. Really, really great for strengthening the hips and the glutes and the abdominals. Let's get up into a little bit of more functional stuff. Our squats and our deadlifts, probably one of my very favorite things to do to help people with those hip extension problems. Your squat, you know, everyone is a little bit different. Some people are going to squat a little more narrow, some people a little bit wider. For those of you that do have very tight IT bands, you'll probably find that it's a bit more comfortable to go with a wider stance. If my feet are going wider, I do have to ensure that I turn the toes so that my knees track in line with the toes. And that kind of width should help me get a little bit more depth, sink down, hopefully stretch into what may be tight adductors a little bit, and really help get that full extension at the top. So the key with this squat here is we really are trying to fire the glutes. So how I finish and end the movement is really important. I'm going to start by ensuring that the hips are fully extended under. So just take a moment there. Flex the glutes, push your feet down into the yoga mat or into the floor, and try and tear the mat a little bit between your feet. Try and create a little bit of that external rotation. So my feet are down, my feet aren't really moving, but they are screwing into the mat, which is making my glutes and my adductors stretch a little bit. So from this position, so gentle tension through the glutes, and then I begin the squat with the hips. The hips move, hips move, hips move, still the hips, and now the knees can bend down. Push the floor away from you and finish full extension at the top. Chest is nice and open. And then if I've got the abdominal strength to do it, I'm also going to keep the torso fairly tall to sit back into those hips and really load those glute muscles. So sit back again. How I initiate the movement, really, really key. Nice degree of glute and abdominal strength on these. And you'll notice hopefully that I'm finishing that move nice and tall, fully extending the quadricep actively, not locking the knees out at all. Very different. I'm extending the quadriceps and the hips to create that nice, tall, stacked pelvis that's coming right under the chest and shoulders. A fantastic progression is to move this to a one-legged squat. So with my one-legged squat, again, exactly the same thing. I still need to really think about ensuring that that movement is hip dominant. I start with that fully extended position. You'll notice I am using the bar here, right? I'm going to use that to help me a little bit with balance. For those of you that are a bit nervous about your knees, your ankles, your hips, feel free to be somewhere where you can grab on if you lose your balance a bit. So I'm going to use this at first to really help me with that mechanical tracking. I'm fully extended up. I begin the movement, hip, hip back, hip back, hip back. Now I can bend the knee, tracks right over the toe, and extend all the way back up. If I can let go and add a little bit of balance into that equation, all the better. Now I'm working on the tracking of my patella, good knee tracking, strong dorsiflexion of the ankle, and again, starting and finishing that movement with the hip is really going to help me activate and strengthen those glutes and those abductors. There's your one-legged squat. The next two that I featured, one was a deadlift, and the other one a one-legged Romanian deadlift. Now your deadlift, as I said, you could do this with weight, without weight, paint cans, as I did a number of weeks ago. We can also use a band. Your deadlift, again, there's some variation to where you can have the legs. We're going to have a very small bend in the knee, but mostly it is a purely hip dominant movement, pure hip flexion and extension all the way through. And the key, of course, at the very top is ensuring that I'm using my glutes to get all the way through and not arching through the low back. So that tension through the glutes and the abs, really, really key. We begin the movement with the hips. So the hips rotate back, you're reaching back, reaching back. The torso, of course, is following the hips as my tailbone goes, right, attaches to my spine, all the way up through my head. My hamstrings are really tight, so right there I start to bend a tiny bit more just to give me a little more room, load the activity, the exercise a little bit more. I'm going to push the feet into the mat, extend the hips all the way up. That's glutes, nothing going into that low back. And if I'm really mindful of the muscles that I'm working, I find I don't actually need to add any weight at all. But for fun, especially those of you who have these TheraBands at home, this is a great way of loading a deadlift. So I'm going to put the band underneath the balls of my feet. I'm going to make sure the band is nice and even tension-wise on either side. I'm going to come all the way up and just check to make sure I can comfortably get into that fully extended position. If this isn't good for me, I'm going to put a little more tension through the balls of my feet so that there's a little less tension, right, on the band coming up from the side of my foot to my hand, so that I ensure that I can come to that fully extended spot without any tension through the back. Nice thing about the band you'll notice is it naturally pulls your shoulders down and back. Mechanics are exactly the same. So brace the glutes, gentle brace through the abs. Start with the hips moving back, hips, 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 hips. Torso follows the hips. Small bend in the knee to get a little more range of motion. Deep breath in and exhale up. And again, deep breath in, exhale up, all the way through, using the tension on that band to help drive that extension, keeping the chest nice and open, tension through the abdominals and the glutes, so that the hip is doing the extending, but the low back is not. Do one more here. Here we go. And then the final strength exercise, of course there are millions, millions and millions. There's clamshells and side band walks and all kinds of groovy stuff. But I'm just sharing with you some of my very favorites. They're simple and complicated all at once, which I love. So my one-legged deadlift, I'm balancing on one leg, just the same as your one-legged squat. I'm going to start with that fully extended, fully engaged position. And then again, it is a hip dominant move. The hip comes back, the torso follows the hip, torso follows the hip. Nice deep breath in, push the foot into the floor and drive all the way up. So once again, because I am balanced on one leg, this is more difficult. I'm loading the ankle and the hip more. There's more core activation and activity. I do have the bar beside me, pardon me, in case I do need to grab onto something if I am concerned for my balance. But the very fact that I am on one leg and that thigh is having to rotate in that hip socket, that's really going to light up the side of that glute. So there you are. There's some mobility work. There's a bunch of stability exercises. Play with them. Be careful, they are complicated exercises. Don't force your stretching. Do not force the strength work. More is not better, but careful, slow, mindful contraction is wonderful. It is the best. And once again, we are live with our virtual training platform. We don't need to train you 5 times a week. Just let us come into your home once or twice, have a look at your squat, have a look at how you're sitting, how you're working, how you're running, anything that's troubling you, and we can definitely give you some personalized insights on how you can feel more comfortable, get better results, be more effective, and really come through this pandemic with flying colors instead of struggling at home. It's what we do best. We would love to help. I'm Meg Sharp, from my home to yours. Hope you're having a great day.